everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Escaping the Chains podcast. We are so happy to have you with us here today. Before we get started, if you could do us a favor and go to our YouTube channel and hit subscribe, watch a couple videos and like them, that would be great. Also, go to Spotify, follow us. If you have an Apple phone, you may not realize it, but you actually have an Apple podcast app. It's purple. We would really appreciate it if you would go on there, follow us, give us a 5-star review, and listen, of course. Like, that's the most important thing, is we want you to listen. So our goal here is to bring awareness to a lot of different topics, but also talk about what God has done in people's lives. So today, one of the things we run into a lot is people ask questions about, what's going on with the youth, all of the vaping, having family members that are in active addiction, just all of the challenges from the pandemic and everything. So today we have Ava with us, and we're excited to have her here. We have actually heard her speak before about growing up with parents that are struggling with addiction, substance abuse disorder, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to dig into talking to her and try to get some of just a young adult's perspective on some of these issues. And also, as always, we're going to figure out what Jesus Christ has done in her life. Hello, Ava.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's good.
So we know Ava really well. So she might act a little shy at first, but I'm close with her parents, and we're basically like family. So Ava, why don't we talk about what are some of your first memories as a child?
Honestly, when I get asked that question, the one thing I can really think of is like the trauma, obviously, that I went through. One of my first memories, like looking back, I would say, obviously, like I remember kindergarten and stuff like that, but throughout my childhood, a lot of my memories are like, I don't know if you want to say faded, but I don't really remember a lot from my childhood. I was just looking back on pictures yesterday, and I was just looking through, and this was like 2016, and these are things like I don't even remember, like birthday parties I don't remember, but one memory that sticks out to me is like my mom taking me to like not trap houses, but drug houses, like runs with her. Those are like my big memories that I remember. And then the memories from when my mom got in the drug bust, those are big memories for me. And then my 5th and 6th grade year are like where my memories really start to pick up, where I can remember things really vividly.
Yeah, so when you were, what was going on when you were in like the 5th or 6th grade?
So the middle of my 4th grade year, my mom had been in a drug bust, and so basically the cops came and busted our door down, took my mom, and DCS got involved with me. So I was taken in for like the whole day, and my mom ended up getting bonded out, and she lived in Fort Wayne for about, 2 months maybe after
the DCS thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
when she had gotten bonded out. But me and her had we were supposed to have zero communication. So that June of 2017, I moved in with my aunt in Indianapolis, and I started school, which is when I started my 5th and 6th grade year. I didn't go to Huntington schools then. And so, April of 2017, my mom got sentenced and was sent to Madison Correctional Facility. And she spent the 2 years there while I spent 2 years in Greenfield.
Okay, so did you have any communication with her when she was locked up?
For when she was locked up the 2 years, yes, I had somewhat of communication with her. I didn't talk to her like as much as I should have, but maybe like once a month she would call, and I would write her little letters here and there. But I didn't have a lot of communication, and it was definitely hard for her because she tried to parent me over the phone.
Yeah.
In jail or in prison, and that I think was a really hard thing for her. Try to like make sure that I'm keeping up on my grades and all of that stuff.
How did you receive that, her trying to parent from jail?
I remember there was one time where I was on the phone with her, and my grades were probably bad or something, and I remember her talking to me on the phone about it, and it's like hard to hear your parent on the end of a phone knowing that they can't come see you, can't get out, like they're in prison and they're trying to tell you something, and like, it's like you feel like they don't understand because they're not here. But it was a little hard to receive because it was like, well, you're not even here, so.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's one of the challenges. Like we have people who talk to us a lot about like if they have a one or both parents like are locked up, sometimes not alive anymore, sometimes just not around. How how young people handle that, which it's different for everybody. But do you feel like you acted out, or like how did you respond to just basically being at your aunt's and the stable figures that were in your life or should have been in your life weren't there at that time?
I actually think I was, I don't know, I don't think I really acted out. I was a pretty good kid, especially when I lived down there. We had a very strict schedule. Like, we had a routine. That's something I've never had before. I never had a routine. Like, we had our, I guess, an everyday routine, like, get up, go to school, come home. Jeff worked third shift, so he would wake up. Mom would probably not be home. And then, but like when I moved with my aunt, we had an actual schedule. Like, you get off the bus, you come do your homework, you sit at the table, you do your homework. After that's done, we eat dinner as a family, and then after that, we can watch TV or whatever. And like, I didn't have a phone throughout the week, had it on the weekends, and that was something that I never had either because I had it whenever I wanted when I lived with my mom and Jeff. But
Yeah.
definitely more of a stricter routine, and I think that kept me in line. And also not being around, like, I don't know what kind of person I would have been today if I would have stayed in Huntington for those 2 years, because I can probably tell you that the people that I would have been friends with went completely opposite ways. Like, I probably would have went down that same path. And also, speaking from where Jeff was in that time.
Jeff is your mother's husband now.
Yes.
So, and we'll probably talk about him in a little bit. So, when you're talking about Jeff, you're talking about your
Yes, he's
mom's
my
husband,
stepdad.
yeah.
The path that he was going down too was not. God definitely knew what he was doing when he placed me 2 hours away with new family, not really, but like a new household, because he knew what the things that Jeff was going through at home was not anything that I should have been around at the time, and definitely kept me stable and around good people. And I had some really good friends when I moved to Greenfield.
All right. So your mom starts to get out of, or is going through the process now after 2 years. She's going to be getting out soon. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And was the plan for you guys to move back together, or were you going to stay in Indianapolis?
No, as much as I was okay with being there, I wanted nothing more than to be home. Like, I remember, like, Jeff would come and see me. He would come to Greenfield and see me or drop me off. Like, I would go there. I would go to Huntington for breaks or the weekends. And when he would drop me off, I was hysterical. And I don't know if anyone's ever seen Hope Floats, but there's a scene in that movie where the dad is leaving and the little girl's chasing the car, like literally running after the car. And if you've seen that movie, it makes sense, but that is literally what I looked like. I was running down the driveway, crying, chasing Jeff's car because I wanted nothing more to just be with him, like be at my house, like my home that I grew up in. So it was really exciting when I did get to move back in, and me and Jeff lived just us two. I'm trying to think of the timeline. That's one thing that's hard, is like the time. There's so much that went on.
Yeah.
And like, it's a big chunk of my life that like is very, like, chronologically I can't think of when everything happened, but I want to say from June of 2019 to June of 2019 to April of 2020, because that's when COVID hit, me and Jeff lived just me and Jeff. So me and him got very used to living with each other, and the way that like we had made a routine, like we did the same thing all the time. And then neither me or Jeff are very like clean freaks. So like when mom came to live back with us, it was like she came home to like this house that was lived in by a 12-year-old and 40-year-old man. So it's not the cleanest thing ever. And I just remember there was a couple times where when she was transitioning, there was some fights that happened because it was just we had to learn how to live with each other again because it had been almost 3 years that we hadn't lived with each other as a family.
So if you're listening, this is one of the things. A lot of times when people are in active addiction, because that's the world that we operate in, they will say, "Oh, my kids are better off without me," right? Or, they're doing better without me and everything. But I want to go back to the part of her story where she was living in Indianapolis. So you were living in Indianapolis, had structure, a good home, eating, doing your schoolwork and all of that stuff, but you still cried when you got dropped off because you wanted to be back home with your people. And I want people, if you're listening or watching, I want you to hold on to that because sometimes we don't, with your kids, it's like, oh, they're in a better situation where they're at. Your kids love you. And most of the time, that's what they want. Like they want the relationship with you. They want to see you. They want to be living with you. And a lot of times as adults, we think, well, they're going on vacations over there and, I'm all screwed up and they have more money or they have more structure and you should have structure. But I want some people to take that away from this is she still just wanted to be back home with what she knew was her family and where she was raised. And the other stuff was good, but it's not what she wanted. And I think in our adult brains, sometimes we process stuff. And I think it's a selfish thing. Sometimes it's easy for me as an adult to be like, oh, my kids are better off without me, so I can go live my life.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really good point just to kind of hit on because, I hear it a lot. Well, it doesn't matter if I live or die, my kids won't care. They will.
Yeah.
They'll be devastated. So you guys are living in a messy house and then Andrea's home. Yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. How'd that go?
It was definitely like, and I really thought, like looking back now, I thought it would be a lot easier to get readjusted. But again, you also have me who's coming out of I had two parent figures who had been married since I was born, and I had two little cousins. So it was like it was a very much like picture perfect family, even though maybe like someone looking in would think that. But and another thing, I was literally yesterday, I'm getting a bunch of pictures ready. I'm graduating next year, so like going through a lot of things, and I found this folder of my like 5th grade schoolwork, and there was a essay that I had wrote in there about Mrs. Stephanie Kelshaw, which was the woman who I was living with as my mom's sister. And I don't even remember writing this, but I wrote it as if she was my mom. So like I literally in my mind like told myself like this is my mom and dad because I didn't want anyone from school finding out that like this is my aunt and uncle, So when I did come back, finally, I came back to just Jeff, and we would go visit my mom on the weekends. But it was more just trying to get used to the fact that, like, she was going to parent, like, when she is parenting me, she's parenting me the right way. Because in my mind, like, when I try to think back, I don't remember, my mom was not in addiction my entire life, but from the time that my memory started to when she got locked up, like that time was when she was in addiction. And I've talked to my therapist about it a couple times, and I don't really know if like because of the trauma that I have, like I just don't remember some of those memories because your brain will block a lot of things that happen. Yeah. And I don't know if that's what happened and that's why I don't remember, but having her come back and actually be my parent was definitely something I had to get used to again, and like having her care about what grades I'm getting in school and what I'm doing and who I'm going running around with and all that thing. And also just me changing as a person, like I was turning into this young woman, and my mom, when she left, I was this 10-year-old little girl who really didn't like I was different when she left, and then I'm evolving into this new young woman that I'm becoming, and like I think it was definitely hard for her too to
Yeah,
kind
but
of
it
recognize
was.
that.
It's hard for us to recognize that if we're there the whole time. I look
Yeah.
at my daughters now, and in my brain, they're still
Yeah.
kids,
Yep.
but they're out there having to make adult type of decisions,
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing. Like you acting like you were staying with your mom and dad in Indianapolis when it was your aunt and uncle, like the pressures of, because sometimes as adults we forget that, but like the pressures of going to school, and you don't want to go to school necessarily and tell everybody, hey, my mom's in jail or my
Yeah.
dad's struggling. Like,
Mhm.
you kind of, and I know some kids or some youth are a little bit more open about that, but you kind of protect that information.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because it's already hard enough, like
Yeah.
to fit in someplace and not get bullied or have people, talk crap.
Oh, the day after I went back to okay, the first day, I don't remember if I missed 2 days or one day, but I went back to school after my mom had gotten in the was in the drug bust. Our name, like her name and our address was on the front page of the paper, and like I went back to school that day in the 4th grade and was literally getting bullied by 4th graders. Like literally. And it's crazy because a couple of the people that I was like getting bullied by are people now who I'm very close with whose parents also struggled in addiction.
Yeah.
So like it's crazy to see, and I think also it's important to remember, like I think society now I know it's so different from when you guys grew up. Like I don't think that it was really necessarily this big of a problem in the schools. And I was just talking to a friend a couple weeks ago of like how many people actually struggle with this, like the same thing I'm going through, and you don't even know it. And that's why I am so open to talking about it, because I've had so many people come to me and be like, "Hey, like this is happening to me, but like I don't have anyone to talk to about it."
Yeah. It affects so many
Yeah.
young adults, and they do, and they're savage.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like when somebody finds that stuff out,
Yeah.
it's really,
It's just one more. It's like you can like someone will find you in a vulnerable spot because of this happening, and then it's just like free for all. Like you can say whatever you want.
mm-hmm.
It's really sad, honestly.
It is. Well, the impact that it has, like you've taken a certain path, and I know, like with, my daughters have dealt with some of it, like, I pray that they continue, but they kind of take a different path. But I was talking to the girls one time, and there was a girl who wasn't making really good decisions. I don't know that she was at her school. It doesn't matter, but, somebody out there, and they weren't making real good decisions with boys and things like that. And we started to talk about it because I think what we need to do is it's like, okay, so where is this person like hurting, instead of being like, like they're this or that, because we judge so easy. And come to find out, like the person that they were talking about when we started to dig in a little bit had lost a father figure or a father or something to an overdose. So from going to having a dad to not having one at all. And that's one of the things, like we work with CORE and some of the stuff I'm doing is like, how do we get in there and like talk to the students that are going through that stuff?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like to just have something so important removed from your life, and then just, taking whatever bereavement and going back to school and having to still handle adult stuff is wild to me. Because when I was younger, we would make mistakes and stuff, and some people had like parents in jail, but it wasn't like this.
Yeah.
It wasn't so many kids are living with grandparents and other.
So many.
It's a lot.
Like so many. It's actually crazy.
It is. When we go to the schools and we start talking, and afterwards we like interact with the students, it's wild. And how many of them know somebody that's overdosed?
Yeah.
I don't think I've talked about this, but I think it was either Huntington or Wells County, but we were at
I think it was Norwell.
and we were at a middle school with 500. There was 500 students, and we asked them, Cody and I, how many of them knew somebody that had overdosed. 80% of those.
Oh, that was
hands
probably
raised.
definitely Huntington then.
Yeah,
if
I
it was
think
that
it
many
was.
kids.
Yeah, 80% of the 500 sixth and seventh graders, or seventh and eighth graders, did.
It's crazy.
And then we asked them, how many of you believe you have a purpose? And it was like 18 hands, right? And I think that because like we're surrounded by all this, everybody's just like what young people are getting taught is just get what you can get now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And you got to look out for yourself, and you can't trust people,
Yeah.
and you got to, you just got to make life work. However, so you grew up having two both of your biological
Yes, both of
parents
them.
struggled with addiction. So what was it like? And I know you ended up, having a stepdad in your life who's actually like a dad, and we love Jeff. But what was it like with having a dad who was struggling?
I think okay. Everyone is like, I think a lot of people see me and maybe think that I am the way I am because Jeff was in my life, but it doesn't take away from the fact that like my biological father is I am a part of him,
Mm-hmm.
and like the connection, no matter if like the connection I had with him was never the strongest, like it is with Jeff. Like me and Jeff are tight. Like me and him are close. He's actually adopting me. We're going through that stuff right now, but like my dad is one person that I think could do anything, and some reason I would always forgive him for whatever he did. And like I will always love him, and I think that it's just like simply because he's my father, even though he hasn't always been there for me. Which has also like obviously been a really hard thing, but I've had to remember that like I do have Jeff in my life, and even though he doesn't replace my dad, he's just there. But it's definitely been hard to watch him go through addiction because I think it was worse than my mom. Probably because my mom, when she went through the drug bust, like that was her rock bottom. She
Mm-hmm.
had everything stripped from her. Her mom, me, Jeff ended up breaking up with her at one point. Like that's their story to tell, but like had everything stripped from her, and then that was just like where it clicked, where she was like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
But it's been hard to watch my dad because it's like he has had chance after chance, and like I don't know how that man is not dead.
Yeah.
Like that seems so harsh to say, but like honestly, the Lord has had to have saved his life more times than I could count or even imagine. But yeah, so he has been in and out of my life pretty much since I was born. Like when I was 2, him and my mom split up, so like that was like the first heartbreak ever that I've ever experienced was like from my dad. And I couldn't tell you how many times, like again, the timeline is messed up. I don't know when he went in and when he was out, but like this time around is the worst that he's ever gotten. He was, I'm not really going to get into all the details because it's really messy, but basically got a dealing charge just last March, and he was just sentenced 35 years last week.
35 years.
May 28th. So yeah, last Tuesday, 35 years of his life. And that man is 46 years old. So if you can do the math.
Yeah.
Because he'll only do 26 years, but
Yeah.
he's obviously like the thing is like I've always been that person in his life that's been like, you need to hit your knees, you need to go to church, like you need to do this, you need to do that. But like at some point I have to take my hands away and be like, I know that the Lord has this in his hands. And like my mom and I will be like, well, we have been praying for this man for years, like literally so long. And it's like finally something happens, and it's like feels like what's the end of the story,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, yeah, he's safe, but like is he really? Because I know that like there's so much drugs that run through the prisons nowadays. Like it's crazy. But so I was praying and praying and praying, and my mom was praying. She is a prayer warrior for this man, and finally he had gotten incarcerated last March. But we just got one of my mom's friends who works in jail just told us yesterday that he's been going to church and stuff, so it's really He went to celebrate recovery yesterday, which is like a really big thing because my dad has always been very like embarrassed of his story, and like
Yeah.
he doesn't like, he always says like, I want to get to a place where I can stand up on the stage and tell it with you by my side. And I think, and at my dad's court date, I wrote a letter to the judge and I read it before his sentencing, and he wrote one too. And one of the things he had said in his letter was, my daughter's my biggest role model. And I think for me to hear that was like just crazy, because how could I have such a big influence on my dad that like I am the reason why he wanted to like pray and hit his knees in the jail cell, because I told him like God wants nothing but for you to just have a relationship with him. That is all he wants. And I had told him back in March when he first got incarcerated, the first thing I said to him was like, you need to stop playing and like it's not a game anymore. You need to hit your knees and like genuinely pray and like ask for forgiveness. And then he had said in that letter that he had wrote the judge last Tuesday, just I've never heard him open up like that before. And I think for me that was very kind of like healing for me, I guess, because I know that like my prayers have made a difference, and I know that what I've been trying to tell him for so long has made a difference. No matter if it's because he is facing a very long time in prison, like I guess that doesn't matter. If I care more about his soul than I do his life here on earth.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I bet it was genuine because we
Yeah.
know him. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. And he texted me, and I texted him this really long thing after sentencing because I was a wreck. And I had said to him, that's when I said again, like, God wants nothing more to just have a relationship with you. And so if that's what, like, if this is what this is going to do, then, like, my hands are off. Like, I can't, no one else can do anything but you and God. And then he had texted me back, and he said, he's like on his little chirps, he's not out, but like he had texted back and said, one day I want to be your role model or something like that. And I was just like, it's really sad, but
yeah, little decisions, huh?
Yeah,
because he's had moments where he was doing well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is had, and I think why it is so hard for me is because he was out for a year when we were going to God's house. It was when, I don't remember, his name was still the pastor there. Like, this was like, yeah, he was still the pastor there, and we would go every Sunday morning and Friday nights when he was going with me. And he, like, my dad has always been my biggest fan. Like, even when he was struggling, because there, I don't remember, it was in December when me and Sierra had shared our story at God's house.
Yeah.
He was very, very deep in addiction, and he still showed up, and I think that was really hard for him to show up when I was sitting there talking about my parents and addiction, and he's sitting there and he had like just relapsed, maybe, I think, a couple months before that. Like in August he had relapsed, and it was December, and he was like really deep. And so he, like, even when he showed up that one time, and then it just got worse from there. But that before that, he was out on house arrest, or he was on house arrest, and we just got really close, like closer than we've ever been before. Yeah. And so I think that's why now I'm struggling so hard with it, because like even though he is not always been in my life, there's always been something that like just like the love that I have for him is like so strong. But I think another thing is like when I love really hard, and I think it's because I'm so scared of losing people because of everything that I've been through, that like that's just what I have to do for myself.
And also probably having the chance to see his potential in those times.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Instead of just like he was always doing bad, so
yeah,
that's all you knew.
And for that year when he was on house arrest, he was going to work. He was doing really good, and he was going to church with us and all of those things. And then he got let off on good behavior, and then went back to the same people in Huntington. And that's where, like, when people say that you have to change your people, places, and things, they are not kidding. You literally have to.
You have to. You never know how strong you are.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to tell people. Like, I've been doing this a long time. So, and, you know, with the circumstances, sometimes I got to go back to the places, but there's no, you never want to test how strong you are.
Yeah.
Because familiar people, your guard starts to fall. And whether it's family, and if you're listening, pay attention, because some people are like, oh, it's my family. Well, sometimes you got to stay away from your family because you get around comfortable spaces and you literally, you may do good 5 times, but that 6th time, you're right back at it. And I think that's a beautiful thing and a sad thing, though, that you get to see the potential, and even though, and it's still there, but then have to end up, kind of going through the situation that's going on now. I would say just happened, but it's a continuing situation.
And I think another thing is, like, it is a little hard for me still to talk about, most of the time I just talk about strictly, like, the side of, like, what happened with my mom, because to me that's, like, the side that I have, like, that's been healed and, like, I don't struggle with anymore. And I forget that, like, I still need to talk about the things that I'm still continue to go through with my dad, because that is, like, someone else could be going through the same thing.
Somebody is going through.
Yeah,
that's a
like
promise,
somebody else is, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just forget sometimes that, like, that side of my story needs to be shared too, because I can stand up on stage and feel like, make it look like I'm, like, I don't go through this anymore if someone doesn't know me.
Yeah.
But, like, I still struggle daily with a parent and addiction still, even though my mom is doing great and is, like, broke free from that. But
yeah, she's actually, and they're going to be on at some point. So, and that's a really good story. So, and another thing I want to touch on is, like, sometimes I think that there's people in our lives that we can't have influence over, but the truth is like, you have an influence over him. Over your dad saying, like, you're a role model, or he looked up to you, or maybe you just sending him a message or saying to his face, like, you need to pray, can change everything.
Oh, and okay, so March 13th of this year, he got bonded out for 2 months, and he went back. So from March 13th to May 3rd, he was out, and I went to see him probably 3 or 4 times a week, like, sometimes. And he was staying here in Gas City. And he obviously, he didn't do anything, like, he went to all those court dates and everything like that. And, but there was a couple times where he had left and went to stay in a hotel with a girl. And I have never screamed the way that I did at my dad. Like, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, I was supposed to go see him, and when I drove from Huntington all the way to Gas City, and I got there, and the girl that he was staying with, which is a really good friend of his, was like, yeah, he's not here. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, he's not here. What do you mean? And, like, obviously the fear in me is like, crap, he went back to it. Because that's all I've ever known is for him to just, like, relapse. And that sounds terrible. But, and so I have threatened him. Like, this sounds so crazy, but I've threatened him with adoption papers. I've literally threatened him with, like, I was like, I'll never talk to you again, like, I will block you, like, all of these things, just because I loved him so much, and all I wanted was for him to be there.
Yeah.
And never did I think 2 months ago that my words were penetrating and, like, doing anything to him. But to sit there and hear his letter to the judge and, like, say how much of an influence that I did have on him, just through this, like, nicer messages that I gave him, like, telling him to pray and all of these things. So
yeah, and he's still, I mean, the story's still being written there too.
Yeah.
I've heard you speak a few times and knowing you, like, so it's a little bit more emotional. Like, I think knowing the people, because you see it too, like, on our end, like, you see the potential in people and the hope that, and you have hope for people, and it's so hard.
It is
so hard.
And I think it makes it so much harder because I do know people like you and Cody and Shane and all of these people that it's like, why can't you just be like them? Like, simply. But then I have to remember God's in control, and maybe he needs to go through this to realize that, like, I need to get my crap together.
And everybody's stories, that's another thing, is like all of the people, all of us that have made it out, our time is different, our moment is different.
Yeah.
And some people, you know what I mean? Some people use a couple times and they're like, oh, screw this,
Yeah.
I'm good. And then there's like me that I had to use everything.
Yeah.
You know, in my run, it was like I had to try it all.
Yeah.
And then somehow, you know, it's all.
Or, yeah, and like that's what I was saying. You have people like my mom who literally get in trouble once and then they're done.
Yeah.
So, everybody is different, and that's why I think it makes me feel a little bit better about this, because I know that this is his story, and one day he will be able to tell it. And
So what would you say to a 10-year-old girl that was sitting in front of you who had two parents in active addiction, and her life was a little bit chaotic, maybe has DCS involved, and she just asked you, like, really simply, like, why don't my parents care about me? Or, you know, like the questions you may have had. What would you say to her?
that's a tough question, honestly, because, like, I don't know, because you can say all the things, but it's like, I would probably just give her a hug and tell her it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, because, again, you can say the things all day long, but, like, do you remember the poem that I had read? It wasn't even a poem, it was like a quote that I read. At one of the times that I spoke, it was like, people in addiction say all day, like, they would live for their kid, or I'm going to have to find it. Can I find it real quick?
Yeah.
And I'll continue to talk. But you can say all the things, but until you actually see the change, it's really hard to, like, believe that everything's going to be okay.
I think another, and I want to get your opinion on this, but I think another thing is, like, sometimes when we're talking to youth, especially younger women, they take the burden on. Like, they almost take blame. Like, okay,
Yeah.
what can I do? Like, I have to save them. They take, and it happens with young men and stuff too. But I know it's like emphasized in our head. It seems like they carry the weight of, like, their parents' decisions.
100%.
Yeah.
Because, and I was just talking to somebody else that had my dad had influence in their life, and I apologized for what my dad had done. Like, and he's a younger kid, and he was living in the house that my dad lived in when he was out on bond, and I just texted him one day, and I was like, I'm sorry for, like, everything that he's done. And he's like, why are you apologizing for what your dad did? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think because he's never taken the time to apologize to anyone, and so I feel like I just have to do that for him. And, like, that's, like, completely wrong, but I found that quote. I'm going to read it really quick.
Okay.
It said, people will say all the time, I'd die for my children, but would you actually live for them, actually live and make better choices? Try practicing sobriety. Take better care of yourself mentally and physically. Your kids don't need you to die for them. They need you to live. And that is, like, one thing that I will always love to read, because I think that sums it up, really. Like,
Yeah.
you can say all day long you would die for your children, but, like, would you live for them? Would
Right.
you make the right choices and just be present, just show up? Like,
Isn't that powerful?
Yeah.
Like, just showing up. I think so many times as a parent, you're like, oh, I've got to do this. Like, you know, I've got to go on vacations, and all that stuff's nice. But it's like, really, what's important is that when I'm there, am I there?
yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's so one thing that I've in counseling now, and I'm still working on a lot of things that like, some of the reasons I am the way that I am today is because of the things that I've been through. Obviously, some of the best parts of me today are are because of what I went through. But I've had to realize that, like, people showing up for me is a really big thing, because my freshman year, I had a really big. I was involved on the swim team, and I had a really big swim meet, and I was doing really good in swim at this point, and all I wanted was for my dad to be there. And I kept texting him out. It was, like, right before I was getting on. I was like, are you here? Are you here? And I kept looking for him, like, in the stand, and he wasn't there. And, like, that is so heartbreaking because he was in addiction at this point when this was going on. And just to like have that like feeling is hard.
Looking
Because
around and
yeah,
you
like
know,
all I wanted you to do was just show up. You just had to sit there and watch, and you didn't. And like that's one thing that I really struggle with is abandonment issues because
yeah,
all somebody needs is for somebody to show up.
that's it. And we complicate it. Have you
Yeah.
seen the videos like on TikTok and stuff where the kids looking for his when they come out on like to sing or anything?
Yeah.
And they're literally looking to
Yes,
see
and then
if
like,
they're
and that's like how I feel in that moment. Is like that little like 10-year-old girl inside of me is like jumping up and down when I see my parent, like my mom and Jeff, who do show up like all the time for me. Like they would drop anything to do anything for me, and then like that's literally how I feel. It's like those little kids that are like jumping up and
Yeah,
down,
they get
like
so
mom,
happy.
yeah,
And then they try to play it off like they're cool, but
Yeah.
at first you can like see like
Yeah.
they burst with like, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
joy. So I want to talk a little bit about where like throughout your life and all the stories you've talked about, where are or will you share a couple of like those moments where it was like God had to be there or you knew God was there, like moments of
like in my childhood.
in your childhood, even now, you know, where the places like, where is God? Because we know he's shown up for your family, you know what I mean? But like in your life, what are some things you're like, oh, whether looking back, 'cause sometimes things will happen, you don't even see it in the moment. You look back, oh my gosh, God was all over that. So where, and it doesn't have to be many because like as you're telling the story, you can tell that God's all over it. But what are some things when you look back or even now where you're like, man, God was all over that or God got me through that?
I think one like just as an overall was like where Jeff was in the time where I needed him the most is like that was God, you know. For me, like when someone would ask me, I think God was working through Jeff in that time just to like because simply all I needed was somebody to protect me. Like that's what I wanted to feel is protected because when you asked me what was one of my biggest memories, I didn't want to just come out and say it right away, but one of my most fond, I think, memories was one night I had woken up. I'm not sure what time it was, and at this point I was, I think, 9. I was 9, and I'd woken up and my mom wasn't home, and Jeff worked third shift. And I didn't have a phone. We didn't have a house phone or anything like that, and so I was freaking out. Like, literally, it was just me and the dog. And what happened was she had left me sleeping to go to Fort Wayne to do a run. Probably, I don't know, 1 a.m. maybe, like a crazy time in the night, you know. And I remember, like, I can feel the rage that I felt that day, like that night. I was so freaking mad, but like, I just, yeah, that was like one of the biggest moments. But I know that like God was there with me because anything could have happened. Like I was literally 9 years old. I could have done. I was literally about to go to the neighbor's house. Like I didn't really know who my neighbors were, but I was about to go over there and be like, "Yo, my mom Pop Smoke, like, save me!" Like it was, I don't know, but I think overall, like, just Jeff and like, oh, that's what I was trying to get to. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, but like just feeling like I was protected, like in that moment, obviously I did not feel like I was protected. And like when I was going through all of this, like Jeff was my protector. And I think that God knew that I needed that in that moment because that's what Jeff was for me. And also like just the protection that I had when I would like go on runs with my mom, like I have seen it all. I walked into a house one day and there was like pills and marijuana and like scales and baggies all over the counter. And like I'm just like this an 8-year-old little girl just walking in like this is my life, like normal life, you know.
Yeah.
And maybe I thought that was normal, I don't know, but like he was there protecting me in that moment too because again anything could have happened.
Yeah. With being around people that have made some of the decisions like what we've heard in this story, do you think that's ever impacted your decision making? Or so like for me, like I had somebody when I was growing up and they sold drugs and stuff, and it had a huge impact. Even though that mean that person stopped talking, I still looked up to that lifestyle. So it still impacted me at some point. So do you think it's ever impacted you in any way in your decision making?
Okay, so for like drugs, absolutely not. Like I have watched my parents struggle. I have watched people around me struggle. Like all of my mom's friends, a lot of like the friends that my mom had are sober now, and I see the life that they live now. I have My mom runs a recovery house. Like I've seen people come in straight off the street, like from using, and like I know that I never ever want to live that lifestyle because it's not a cool lifestyle to live. Like I was just in Fort Wayne yesterday and I saw this man and he was like crazy, like acting crazy. He was like tweaking, and I was like, that is like I never would want to live a life like that.
Yeah.
And it's like it's sad, but like I think it's also to remember that like just because I've seen all these things doesn't mean that I'm always going to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
I'm obviously still a kid. Like I'm literally 17 years old.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out my life too, and I'll speak a little bit about this. But last summer, and that was like my sophomore year, and that summer, I just broke up with a boyfriend at the time, like literally, like the beginning of June of last summer. And I think just the friends that I was hanging out with, and like that whole summer, I was just not making good decisions. Like I wasn't surrounding myself with the people that I should have been. And you can definitely be influenced, but my influence isn't going to come from my parents, because I have seen that. I've lived through that. I know, like, I would never want my children to go through what I went through.
Yeah.
But I think also, like, it's important, like, not everybody goes through these phases, but, like, I think it's good that I went through my little, like, rebellion phase, like, as younger, when my parents were there to be like, hey, like, you need to fix this, like, this is not right, rather than getting out in the real world when I go to college and I'm like, have all the freedom to make the decisions that I want. But my parents now are very supportive, and they make sure that.
Was there anything, so when you wake up, because I lived this life, and you decide, hey, forget everything, I'm going to do what I want to do. Was there anything that like an adult could have said to you that may have had an impact, or was it just you feel like you probably had to figure this out or learn it on your own?
That's okay. So for a while, no one knew about anything I was doing. Like I literally would come home and be like, "Oh, I'm a perfect little angel," and then something happened. My mom found out, and then boom, like. But there was, like, I've always told my mom, let me learn on my own. I've always been that way. I want to learn these lessons so that I can say, I learned this lesson and my mom didn't tell me, you know? Because, like, I think also as kids, to listen to your parents, be like, okay, yeah, you know what you're talking about. But, like, literally, they know what they're talking about. Like, they do. And it's not until I learn the lesson to when then I can go back and say, hey, Mom, you were right. Yeah. Or, hey, Jeff, you were right. Like, this did happen. And that happens more often than not. And, but I was definitely, still am, like, let me learn these lessons on my own. Even if it is going to hurt me, because, like, these are things that I would hope to, like, grow up with and then maybe tell my kids. And then it's just, like, the same thing. But my mom only knows these things because she went through it. So, like, I want to have the same experiences and be able to say, like, I learned this lesson on my own, and my mom didn't tell me something, you know?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So we sat, and we're going to close out here in a second, but we sat on youth panels that are youth boards that are led by the youth, you know, high school students, a couple of them, and we go in, we don't get to ask a lot of questions, we got to write them down like they run the thing. And I think one of the biggest things we pick up on, and if you're listening, this is so huge, is because sometimes it feels like there's a communication gap between this generation coming up and the rest of us. It's just like, why don't they listen? Why do they vape? Why do they act the way that they act? But one of the things has been really telling in talking to some of the youth is, first off, as an adult, we can't act like we understand everything where you're going through, but also communicating with young adults like they're adults too, like having a conversation instead of always, we've heard that a lot, is like, communicate with me. We're not from the same generation. We don't have those things in common, but at least talk to me like I'm, not ignorant, So, and I've seen that work, I think, with my daughters. When I'm having conversations with them, it goes a lot better. And you have to discipline and everything, but it goes a lot better when we're having a conversation. Yeah. Not that I'm treating them like, full-blown adults or anything, but we have the conversation. Like, I respect, that you're going through things in life, and I would like to understand better what those things are and have like an open communication.
And I've had a lot of talks with my mom and Jeff too, because it's like, not only am I, like, this is my first day being this old, I'm still figuring out my life, and like, I have a lot of decisions I have to make here soon. Like, where am I going to go to college? What am I going to do? Do I want to do this? All these things. And not to mention the, like, standard that you're held to on social media. And I'm not saying that, like, this is a good thing, but, like, there are standards that you're held to in society nowadays. And, like, as unfortunate as that is, like, I am a little better now than I used to be. Like, I don't care what really people have to say about me. But, like, it is hard. Like, and I try to tell my mom, you did not grow up in a society where you had social media. You did not grow up in a society where you had people making Instagram pages about you to hate on you. Like, that is a real thing. Yeah. And people go through it all the time. And, like, to grow up in a society like that, I think just everyone has a different perspective. But also, like, communication is actually key, because if I don't communicate with my mom, like, if we don't communicate, it is, like, bad. It's all bad. So, like, I think my mom has done a really good job, and Jeff, too, of, like, realizing, and, like, we've had a lot of civil conversations, and I think it's definitely been different. Like, I wish so badly that I would have been born in the 80s. Like, or the 90s. Like, I wish I could have just had that where, like, I don't have to worry about going to Salamone to go fishing and, like, these men trying to, like, traffic me. Like, that's an actual fear that, like, my parents have. Yeah. And, like, that's just crazy, because 40 years ago, you really wouldn't have to worry about that as much.
Yeah, it was a lot different.
Yeah, like, you wouldn't have to worry about, like, walking downtown somewhere and, like, being catcalled, or like, just those types of things.
Well, you get catcalled a lot. They were bad in the 70s. Yeah. In the 80s, they were real bad at that. But
bad example.
But yeah, Domino's Pizza used to have your pizza to you in 30 minutes back then, and your phone was attached to the wall. Yeah, you had to make plans with people back then. Okay, so Ava, we thank you for coming on. Jeff and Andrea will probably be on at some point, I'm sure.
They have an amazing story, too.
Yeah, really good stuff that has impact on this and everything. And we thank you for being so transparent and coming in and talking with us. And parents, listen. Parents, listen. Be present. Be present and talk to your kids.
Your actions speak louder than words.
Yeah. Don't be out there acting all stupid and then tell your kids to act all smart. That doesn't work. Exactly. So we thank you guys for listening. Please go check us out. Subscribe on YouTube. Hit us up on iTunes Podcast, 5-star review, and follow us on Spotify. We have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, and a TikTok. So go check us out. We thank you all for listening. You might want to listen to this one twice, because there was a lot of good stuff in there, especially if you have some youth around you or kids around you that might have parents that are struggling in the neighborhood, in the church, or just aunts or uncles that you're aunts or uncles of. So thank you for tuning in. This is Escaping the Chains podcast. I'm John Humphreys. Thank you.